Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Invitation to Ravenshade. It was a bleak and wind-torn afternoon when Hercule Poirot, seated neatly by the fireplace in his London apartment, received the letter that would draw him once more into the heart of human darkness. The envelope was heavy, the paper thick and embossed with an ornate crest, 2 ravens entwined around the letter R. He examined it with his usual delicacy, holding it by the edges so as not to smudge a single mark. "From Surrey, Hastings," he murmured, turning it under the light. "And scented faintly, lavender, I think." The choice of a woman both refined and anxious. Captain Hastings, who was poring over the day's newspaper, looked up. "Another admirer, Poirot." Poirot smiled, that small, amused smile that spoke of endless patience. "Ah, mon ami, admiration and desperation often travel in the same envelope." He slid the letter open with precision and unfolded the thick cream page. The handwriting within was slanted, elegant, and yet, to Poirot's sharp eyes, trembling with fear. He read aloud. "Monsieur Poirot, you will forgive the liberty of a stranger writing to you, but I find myself in dire distress. My stepson, Julian Ravenshade, is unwell, not in body, but in spirit. He speaks of voices in the night, of footsteps that follow him through the corridors. The servants whisper of a curse that haunts Ravenshade Hall. I am not a fanciful woman, Monsieur Poirot, but I confess I am afraid. If you value human life, and I believe you do, I beg that you come. Yours faithfully, Lady Helena Ravenshade." Hastings gave a low whistle. "Sounds like a family of lunatics. Ghosts and curses indeed." Poirot folded the letter carefully. "No, Hastings. There is no ghost. There is only fear, and fear, when it festers, leads to folly, and sometimes to crime." He looked up with a gleam in his green-grey eyes. "We shall go to Ravenshade Hall." 2 days later, their motorcar wound through the misty lanes of Surrey, the countryside drenched in late autumn drizzle. The hedgerows were bare, the air thick with damp earth and the scent of fallen leaves. Hastings, who was driving, remarked gloomily that the weather suited the letter perfectly. Ravenshade Hall appeared suddenly out of the fog, a great grey mass of stone crouched upon a rise, its windows like blackened eyes staring across the moor. A pair of iron gates stood ajar, creaking faintly as the wind passed through them. "Mon Dieu," murmured Poirot, peering from beneath his bowler hat, "it has the air of melancholy, n'est-ce pas? One feels already the tragedy that has walked these corridors." At the front entrance they were received by a tall, solemn man in a dark coat, the butler, Merrick. His face was as expressionless as carved marble, yet his eyes darted nervously toward the shadows of the hall. "Lady Helena awaits you in the drawing-room, sir," he said, bowing. They were led through a corridor lined with ancestral portraits, pale faces emerging from darkness, their painted eyes watchful and severe. The silence of the house was broken only by the tick of a long case clock somewhere in the distance. Lady Helena Ravenshade rose as they entered. She was a handsome woman of about 50, her dark gown heavy with mourning silk. A widow's cap veiled her silver hair, and her fingers clutched a lace handkerchief that trembled faintly as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot tell you how relieved I am to see you." Poirot bowed courteously. "Madam, you honor me. You speak in your letter of fear. May I ask, fear of what?" Lady Helena hesitated. "My stepson, Julian, has changed. Since his father's death last spring, he has been restless. At night, he hears footsteps outside his door. Once, he swore he saw a shadow pass his window though he was on the 3rd floor. The servants say the hall is cursed, that my husband's spirit walks." Hastings shifted uncomfortably. "And you believe them, Lady Helena?" She gave a faint, sad smile. "I believe my house is ill with secrets, Captain Hastings. Whether they belong to the living or the dead, I cannot say." Poirot inclined his head. "And your household, madam? Who else resides here?" "There is my niece, Clara. She came to comfort me after my husband's death. A sweet girl, though high-strung. And Dr. Marbury, our family physician, he visits often, for Julian's nerves, you understand. I fear he encourages my stepson's dependence on sedatives." Poirot's moustaches twitched thoughtfully. "And Julian himself, I may meet him." "He is resting upstairs. He insisted on solitude today. But you shall see him at dinner." At that moment, the door opened and a young woman entered, slim, fair, with eyes that held both intelligence and unease. "Clara, my dear," said Lady Helena, "this is Monsieur Hercule Poirot." Clara curtsied faintly. "I've heard of you, monsieur. My cousin said you could see guilt before a man himself knows it." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Sometimes, mademoiselle. And sometimes, I must wait until he betrays himself with a single careless word." A flicker of a smile passed over her lips, the first warmth the house had offered them. But as the afternoon darkened, a strange heaviness settled upon the hall. Outside, the wind rose, moaning across the chimneys like a voice in lament. Dinner was served in near silence. Julian Ravenshade appeared only briefly, a tall, pale young man with dark hollows under his eyes and an air of restless impatience. He scarcely touched his food, speaking only to mutter that the house was watching him. Poirot observed him closely, noting the trembling of his hands, the darting glance toward the door. "You are not well, monsieur." Julian gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Oh, I'm perfectly well, except for the footsteps that follow me, the voices that whisper, and the eyes I feel upon me when I sleep." "Julian!" Lady Helena cried softly. "Not before the guests." He pushed back his chair and left the table without another word. The sound of his retreating footsteps echoed long after he was gone. Later, as the storm broke over the moor, Poirot stood by the tall window in the guest room, gazing out at the twisted trees thrashing in the rain. Hastings, by the fire, remarked uneasily, "A queer business, Poirot. The fellow looks half mad." "Perhaps," said Poirot quietly. "But madness, my friend, may be the disguise of fear or of guilt. We shall see." At that instant, a peal of thunder rolled above the house, followed by a sound, faint, distant, yet unmistakable, a scream. Poirot's head snapped up. "Hastings, did you hear?" The cry echoed again, rising from somewhere deep within the hall, a single, piercing note of terror, swiftly cut short. Poirot's eyes glinted like steel. "The game, mon ami," he said, reaching for his coat, "has begun." Chapter 2, A Death Most Dreadful. The echo of that dreadful scream had scarcely died before Poirot was out of the room, moving with astonishing swiftness for one of his measured years. Hastings followed close behind, his heart thudding in his chest. The corridors of Ravenshade Hall stretched before them, dimly lit by flickering lamps that trembled with the storm's fury outside. From somewhere above came the frantic sound of running feet, the creak of a door flung open, and then a woman's shriek, "Help! Oh God, help him!" They rushed up the grand staircase to the first floor. There, at the end of the passage, stood Lady Helena, pale as marble, her hand pressed to her mouth. Behind her, the butler Merrick emerged from a bedroom, his face drained of colour. "It's Mr. Julian, sir," Merrick stammered. He's dead." Poirot brushed past them, entered the room, and halted. Hastings, following, stopped short. Julian Ravenshade lay sprawled upon the carpet beside his bed. His nightshirt was so dark with blood, his throat cruelly cut from ear to ear. The heavy drapes flapped against the windows, letting in gusts of wind and rain, and on the dressing table nearby a candle guttered, its wax dripping in slow rivulets like tears. For a moment, there was only the storm and the dreadful stillness of the body. Lady Helena gave a low moan and would have fallen had Hastings not caught her arm. Poirot knelt beside the corpse. "The wound is clean," he murmured. "Deep, and with a steady hand. Observe, Hastings, the razor lies there, conveniently close to the right hand. The appearance of suicide, yes. But appearances, mon ami, are like perfume, they conceal more than they reveal." He examined the razor. It gleamed unnaturally, recently cleaned. The faintest trace of moisture clung to the edge, but no blood stained its handle. Poirot's sharp eyes missed nothing. He leaned closer to the floor, studying the carpet. "There are droplets of blood," he said softly. "But none upon the sheets. If he had cut his throat while in bed, we would see otherwise. And look, the body lies by the window, not the bed. Why move, if one intended self-destruction?" Hastings swallowed hard. "You mean someone killed him, and staged this?" Poirot straightened, his expression grave. "Precisely." Lady Helena, recovering herself, whispered hoarsely, "But the door, it was locked. Merrick had to force it open." Poirot turned to the butler. "You are certain of that?" "Yes, sir. I knocked, but Mr. Julian did not answer. Then I heard a fall, or something heavy. I fetched a key, but it would not turn. I broke the lock." Poirot nodded slowly, glancing at the door. The lock was splintered, the metal bent inward from the blow. He picked up the fallen key from beside Julian's hand and examined it carefully under the lamplight. Scratches, Hastings, faint, but visible. Someone tampered with this key before the end. He walked to the window. Rain lashed against the glass, and a thin curtain of mist obscured the gardens below. Poirot opened the latch and peered at the sill. Tiny specks of mud marked the wood, fresh, wet, and irregular. The mud upon the ledge, the open latch, voila! Our murderer may have entered here. Hastings frowned. "But we're 2 floors up, Poirot. No one could climb?" Poirot raised a finger. "No one human, perhaps. Yet a ladder, or the ivy upon the wall. A desperate man will find desperate means." At that moment, Dr. Marbury burst into the room, his coat hastily thrown over his pajamas. His thin face was drawn and his spectacles fogged with rain. "What's this?" "Good heavens, Lady Helena, what's happened?" "Julian," she sobbed. "He's dead, murdered." The doctor knelt by the body, feeling the pulse out of habit, though the truth was plain. "Poor fellow," he muttered. "But no, look here, Poirot. This is clearly self-inflicted. He's been unbalanced for weeks. He told me only yesterday he couldn't bear the voices any longer." Poirot's eyes glinted. "Indeed? And yet, doctor, you do not ask how a man cuts his throat, then neatly wipes his razor clean and locks his own door." Dr. Marbury's expression hardened. "If you're suggesting—" "I suggest nothing, Monsieur le Docteur. I only observe." Poirot's tone was gentle but final. The constable from the nearby village arrived soon after, summoned by telephone. A plain, red-faced man named Sergeant Wilkes. He was brisk and businesslike, yet clearly uneasy in the presence of the famous detective. He examined the room briefly, then said with the confidence of the unimaginative, "Looks like a clear case, Mr. Poirot. Poor chap's done himself in. They often choose a stormy night, don't they?" Poirot gave him a courteous bow. "Ah, Sergeant, you are very kind to relieve me of my labours, but alas, I am obstinate. I prefer to wait until all the facts speak. He moved about the room again, inspecting every object, the brandy glass on the dressing table, half full, the unlit cigarette crushed beside it, the faint smell of disinfectant in the air. Then he crouched before the hearth. Within the small fireplace, among the ashes, something caught the light. Poirot reached in delicately with his silver-tipped tweezers and withdrew a curled, half-burnt scrap of paper. Only 2 words remained legible: "cannot forgive." He placed it carefully in his pocket-book. "Curious," he murmured. A note destroyed, and the smell of cleansing fluid. The murderer wished to purify the scene, yes? But even the most careful criminal forgets that scent is a memory, mon ami. Lady Helena, pale and shaking, whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, you truly think someone in this house killed him?" Poirot looked at her steadily. "I think, madam, that one among you knows more than he, or she, dares admit. There is deceit here, wrapped in fear." Outside, thunder boomed again, and the windows rattled in their frames. The storm raged as if the heavens themselves protested the crime below. Poirot turned to Hastings. "You will do me the kindness, mon ami, to note every clock in the house. We must learn when this tragedy occurred." "Every clock?" Hastings asked, surprised. "Mais oui. One is often surprised how a clock, when compared to another, tells the truth a man would hide. And speak with the servants, but gently. Fear will loosen their tongues faster than suspicion." As Hastings left to obey, Poirot took one last look at the dead man. His features, though peaceful now, still bore the faint trace of horror, as though he had seen something unthinkable in his final moment. Poirot drew the sheet over the face and murmured, "You saw your murderer, monsieur. And perhaps, in death, you still accuse him." He turned to Lady Helena. "Madam, the house must remain locked tonight. No one leaves, no one enters. By morning, perhaps, we shall know more." Lady Helena nodded weakly. "If there is justice, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "bring it to Ravenshade." Poirot bowed. "It shall come, madam. Of that, I give you my word." As he and Hastings descended the staircase, the candlelight trembled upon the portraits of the dead Ravenshades watching from the walls. The old clock struck midnight, slow, solemn, and cold. Poirot paused, listening to its echo fade. Then he said softly, "A locked room, a cutthroat, a storm, and a frightened household. The pattern begins to form, Hastings, but the design, that will require the little grey cells." Chapter 3, The Shadows of Ravenshade. Dawn crept reluctantly over Ravenshade Hall, turning the rain-soaked windows to dull silver and the sky to the colour of pewter. The storm had passed, but its memory clung to the house, a damp chill that seemed to seep into its very stones. The corridors were hushed, the servants moving about like ghosts, speaking only in whispers. Poirot, immaculate as ever, sat in the breakfast room. His grey suit was freshly pressed, his moustaches gleamed, and before him lay a small notebook, open and already half-filled with neat, precise handwriting. Hastings entered, looking tired and slightly dishevelled. "Morning, Poirot. I've spoken to the servants as you asked." Not one of them heard or saw anything out of the ordinary, except that the lights in Mr. Julian's room were burning past midnight. Poirot stirred his coffee delicately. "That, mon ami, is not nothing. The extraordinary often disguises itself as the ordinary to the inattentive eye. We must be more observant than that, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings sat down with a sigh. "I can't make head or tail of it. If it wasn't suicide, how did the fellow lock his door?" Poirot smiled faintly. Hastings, always the how, never the why. But remember, when we understand the why, the how will reveal itself most obligingly." He rose, closing his notebook. "Come, we shall speak to the household." Already, the silence in this place shouts louder than words. 1. Lady Helena. They found Lady Helena in the drawing room, seated by the fire, though it was hardly alight. Her face was drawn, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. In her lap lay the same lace handkerchief, now crumpled and damp with tears. "Madam," said Poirot gently, taking a seat opposite her, "I regret that duty compels me to trouble you again so soon. I must ask, when did you last see your stepson alive?" She hesitated. "At dinner, last night. He left the table early." I wished to follow him, to speak kindly, but he was not to be found. "And afterward?" "I heard nothing. I took a sleeping draught, Dr. Marbury's prescription, and did not wake until Merrick came knocking." Poirot inclined his head. "You were fond of your stepson?" Her hands trembled. "He was difficult, proud, suspicious, but I tried to understand him. Since his father's death, he had grown almost paranoid. He accused me once of trying to poison him." "Poison him," repeated Hastings, startled. Lady Helena gave a weak laugh. "A foolish fancy. He said the brandy I sent to his room tasted strange. I thought it was only his imagination." Poirot made a note. "This brandy, you sent it last night?" "Yes." Merrick carried the tray as usual. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Merci, madam. You have been most helpful." 2. Clara. They found Clara Ravenshade in the morning room, standing by the window, her pale face turned toward the grey landscape beyond. Her fair hair was unbrushed, and her eyes were red with weeping. "Please, don't ask me to describe it again," she said as Poirot entered. "I cannot bear it." "I shall not ask you to describe, only to remember," Poirot replied kindly. "You were fond of your cousin." "Julian?" "He was like a brother to me, though sometimes I hardly knew him. He was so changed these last weeks. He said someone was watching him. Once, he even woke the whole house, claiming a man had been in his room." "And was there?" She shook her head. "Nothing. But he swore he heard breathing near his bed." Poirot tapped his notebook thoughtfully. "And you, mademoiselle, where were you when you heard the scream last night?" "In my room, on the second floor. I opened my door but saw no one. Only the lights in the corridor flickering, and then Merrick running past." Poirot studied her a moment. "You are observant, mademoiselle. Did you notice the time?" She frowned. "A little after 11, I think. I had just wound my clock." Poirot's eyes brightened. "Ah, excellent. And tell me, this handkerchief upon your chair, it is yours?" She looked down. "Yes." "Why?" He examined it briefly, noting a faint green thread caught in the lace. "No reason, mademoiselle. It is only that details, they amuse me." 3. Dr. Marbury. Dr. Marbury received them in the library, where he had set up a makeshift desk. He was pale, yet composed, his spectacles gleaming coldly in the morning light. "You wish to question me, Mr. Poirot? I hope we can keep this brief. Lady Helena is in no state for excitement." Poirot inclined his head. "Naturally. It is only routine. You were summoned after the discovery, yes?" "Yes. Merrick fetched me. I came at once." "And before that, when did you last see the deceased?" "Yesterday evening. He was agitated, complaining of persecution. I prescribed a sedative, as I have before." Poirot's brow rose slightly. "Sedatives can be dangerous if taken in excess." "I know my trade, Mr. Poirot," said the doctor stiffly. "I measured the dose myself." "Of course. And your relationship with Mr. Ravenshade's late father, it was close. I attended him for 15 years. Heart failure, as you may know. A peaceful passing. Poirot nodded absently, his eyes drifting to a leather medical bag on the desk. Its green silk lining was visible where the stitching had frayed. You have been long in Lady Helena's service. On and off. I live nearby. Ravenshade is an old house, its people need constant care. Poirot's gaze lingered on the bag a moment longer before he said softly, Indeed, Doctor. Perhaps they need more than care. Dr. Marbury frowned. What are you implying? Rien du tout, monsieur. I imply nothing. I only observe that you are a man who does not sleep easily. The doctor's lips tightened. I have patience, Mr. Poirot. Their troubles keep me awake. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, naturally. The living, always more troublesome than the dead. For the clues. When they left the library, Hastings exhaled loudly. You think the doctor's lying, Poirot? Poirot raised a gloved finger. Lying, perhaps not. Concealing, très possible. He paused, glancing down the corridor where Merrick stood polishing the silver tray. Tell me, Hastings, do you smell it? Smell what? That faint odor, disinfectant again. The same as in Julian's room. I detect it upon the tray as well. Curious, n'est-ce pas? They approached the butler. Merrick stiffened as Poirot addressed him. Merrick, you took the brandy to Mr. Julian last night. Yes, sir. As I always do. He wouldn't sleep without it. Did anyone else touch the glass or the decanter? No, sir. Only me. Poirot looked at the tray again. And yet you cleaned it, just now. Merrick hesitated. Naturally, sir. It was my duty. Poirot smiled faintly. But you used disinfectant, not polish. A peculiar choice. The butler's face turned slightly grey. Habit, sir. I like things clean. Poirot regarded him thoughtfully, then turned away. So do I, my good man. So do I. 5. The burnt note. Later, in his room, Poirot unfolded the scrap of paper recovered from the fireplace. By holding it close to the lamp, he revealed faint traces of writing beneath the charred edge. Cannot forgive, betrayal, poison. Hastings leaned over his shoulder. Poison? But he was cut, not poisoned. Poirot nodded slowly. Precisely. Which suggests, mon ami, that this letter was written before the knife was drawn. A quarrel, a threat, perhaps a confession. He looked up, his eyes distant. There is darkness here, Hastings. A house where love curdles into hatred, and care becomes control. Our murderer hides behind gentility, and soon, very soon, we shall catch a glimpse of his mask. Outside, the wind sighed across the lawns, carrying with it the mournful cry of rooks circling the grey turrets of Ravenshade Hall. The shadows, it seemed, had grown longer. Poirot closed his notebook. We are surrounded by lies, my friend. But fear not, the truth, she always has a way of whispering to those who listen. Chapter 4, Secrets and Suspicions. The following morning dawned clearer, yet no ray of sunlight seemed able to pierce the gloom that hung over Ravenshade Hall. The household went about its duties with the cautious silence of a church after a funeral. Only the faint chiming of the clocks disturbed the stillness, a sound Poirot listened to often, as though they whispered truths no one else could hear. He was seated in the library, immaculate as ever, a cup of chocolate steaming beside him. Hastings stood at the window, staring out toward the long gravel drive where a constable paced back and forth. Another grey day, Hastings muttered. It's as if the house itself refuses to breathe. Poirot smiled faintly. "My's OUI, Hastings. Ravenshade is like a patient, fevered, restless, concealing the cause of its illness. We must be its physicians, but with the scalpel of logic, not the tonic of sympathy." He took a letter from his pocket. "See, my friend, this morning's post brings enlightenment." Hastings stepped closer. "What is it?" "A reply to a telegram I sent to Julian's bankers last night." Poirot opened the envelope with delicate precision. Before his death, Julian Ravenshade withdrew the sum of £5,000 in cash. The timing, 2 days before the tragedy. £5,000. Hastings whistled. "Good heavens, what for?" "Ah, that is the little question," Poirot murmured. "And the big question follows, where is that money now?" He folded the paper carefully and rose. "We shall inquire, mon ami. But first, we must speak to Lady Helena, for in matters of inheritance, even affection may disguise avarice." 1. The widow's burden. Lady Helena received them in her boudoir, dressed now in deep violet silk instead of mourning black. Her composure had returned, though her face bore lines of strain. "Madam," Poirot began gently, "I regret to intrude, but certain facts must be clarified. Your late husband's will, may I ask, to whom does the estate pass?" She hesitated. "Half to me, half to Julian." "But, since his death?" "The entirety passes to you, naturellement," Poirot finished softly. "That is, quite fortunate, n'est-ce pas?" Her cheeks flushed. "You suggest I desired such a thing?" "Monsieur Poirot, how dare you?" He bowed slightly. "Forgive me, madam. I suggest nothing, I merely observe. And I observe that fortune has smiled upon you, even as fate has frowned." She turned away sharply, her voice trembling. "I would give every penny to have him back." "You must believe that." "I do," Poirot said kindly. "And yet, we cannot ignore that others may not share your tenderness." He paused. "Tell me, Lady Helena, did Julian ever quarrel with anyone regarding the will?" Her voice dropped. "With Dr. Marbury. My husband trusted him implicitly. He was named executor of the estate. Julian believed the doctor used that position to influence his father's final decisions." "Ah." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "And did the doctor benefit from those decisions?" "A modest annuity. But Julian claimed it was unjust. He threatened to contest it." Poirot made a note. "Merci, madam. You have helped more than you know." 2. Clara's confession. Poirot found Clara in the garden, walking slowly along the damp gravel paths, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The morning mist still clung to the hedges, and the distant caw of crows filled the silence between them. "You walk alone, mademoiselle?" "It is brave, or perhaps foolish, with such shadows about." She gave a faint, sad smile. "I cannot breathe indoors. It feels as if the walls are listening." "Perhaps they are," Poirot said mildly. "In old houses, secrets cling to the plaster." She stopped, biting her lip. "You think someone here killed Julian?" "You must. I can see it in your eyes." Poirot inclined his head. "And you, mademoiselle? Do you think so?" She hesitated. "I don't know. But I saw something that night. I didn't tell you before because it seemed impossible." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Tell me everything, if you please." "When the storm began," she said slowly, "I couldn't sleep. I went to close my window and I saw, well, I thought I saw, a figure crossing the terrace below Julian's window. A man in a dark cloak. I only glimpsed him between flashes of lightning." "Could you recognize him?" "No. only that he moved quickly, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Poirot considered this. A cloak, you say? Dark, heavy, against the rain. He gave a small nod. Very good, mademoiselle. You have done well to speak. Clara's hands tightened on the shawl. There's something else. Julian told me 2 nights before he died that he'd discovered a terrible truth, something that would ruin someone in the house. But he wouldn't tell me who. Merci, said Poirot softly. That is most illuminating. 3. The butler's guilt. Inside, Poirot found Merrick polishing the family silver in the dining room. The man's face was grey and weary, his hands trembling slightly as he worked. Merrick, Poirot began pleasantly, it is said that a butler knows every secret of his household. Tell me, what secret lies beneath this one? Merrick's eyes flickered. I know nothing, sir. Come, come. You are an excellent servant, yes, but you are also human. You see, you hear, you wonder. The butler's composure cracked. I did hear something, sir. 2 nights before the master's death. Raised voices, Mr. Julian and Dr. Marbury, arguing in the study. Ah, indeed. Poirot's eyebrows lifted. And what was said? I couldn't hear everything. But I caught a phrase, something about forging signatures and filthy money. Then the doctor left, looking white as death. Poirot nodded slowly. Très intéressant. And since then, you have seen the doctor act strangely. Merrick hesitated. He was in the library late last night, sir. After the police had gone. He said he was searching for Lady Helena's medical file, but I swear I saw him locking something into his bag. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A medical man, Hastings, who hides rather than heals, eh? The picture becomes clearer. 4. The portrait. That afternoon, Poirot wandered through the drawing room, pausing before a large portrait that dominated the wall, that of Sir Edward Ravenshade, the deceased patriarch. The painted eyes seemed almost alive in the dim light, sharp and disapproving. Hastings entered quietly. I see you're studying the family ancestors again. Poirot smiled. Indeed. Observe, Hastings, how the artist has captured the man's gaze. Stern, proud, and yet, there is something, troubled. I wonder what secrets he took to his grave. Do you really think the father's death might be connected to the son's? Poirot turned slowly. When one death imitates another, mon ami, it is seldom coincidence. He stepped closer to the mantel and pointed. Look here, a key, fallen behind the clock. Fresh dust disturbed. And a faint trace of mud upon the carpet below the window. Always, the mud. You think someone entered this room too? I think, Hastings, that someone has moved freely through this house by night, unseen, perhaps in servant's clothing, perhaps not at all what he seemed. 5. The whisper in the dark. That night, as rain began once more to whisper against the windows, Poirot sat at his desk, writing. Hastings had long since retired. The house lay in uneasy silence. Then, a sound. A soft creak. A footstep in the corridor. Poirot turned sharply. The handle of his door moved, once, twice, then stopped. He rose silently and opened it. The corridor was empty, but a faint scent of disinfectant lingered in the air. On the floor, just beyond the threshold, lay a single object, a strip of green silk, torn cleanly along one edge. Poirot bent to pick it up, his expression unreadable. Ah, he murmured, our phantom leaves his calling card. He turned the light off and looked out into the darkened hall, speaking softly to the silence. The shadows lengthen, Hastings, and soon one of them will be caught. Chapter 5. The Second Terror. The next day dawned bleak and colourless, as though the sky itself had gone pale with dread. The air hung thick and unmoving, and Ravenshade Hall seemed to shrink under its own weight, a fortress of silence. Poirot, who had slept but little, appeared at breakfast perfectly composed, his moustaches gleaming, his attire immaculate. Across the table, Lady Helena's hand trembled as she lifted her cup. Clara sat opposite, her face wan and drawn. Hastings tried to summon conversation but failed, even the ticking of the clock seemed too loud. Dr. Marbury entered late. His eyes were bloodshot, his face unshaven. "I've had little rest," he muttered. "This cursed house gives one nightmares." Poirot regarded him steadily. "It gives one thoughts, Doctor, and thoughts, unlike dreams, may be dangerous." Marbury looked away sharply. "You speak in riddles, Monsieur Poirot." "Huh?" "Never." Poirot smiled faintly. "I speak in patterns." 1. The cry in the corridor. The uneasy calm of the morning shattered shortly before noon. Poirot and Hastings were in the library, reviewing his notes, when a piercing scream rang through the hall, high, sudden, and filled with mortal terror. They ran into the corridor, where Clara Brent came stumbling from the east wing, white as snow. "It's Lady Helena," she gasped. "In her room. Oh, God, hurry!" Poirot moved swiftly, Hastings at his side. They reached Lady Helena's bedchamber, and Hastings froze in the doorway. She lay sprawled upon the carpet, one hand clutching at her throat. The mirror behind her was shattered, and beside her overturned chair stood an empty glass, the faintest scent of almonds lingering in the air. Poirot bent down, touching her wrist gently. He closed his eyes for a moment, then shook his head. "It is finished." "Poison?" Hastings whispered. Poirot nodded grimly. "Prussic acid, beyond doubt. Instant and cruel." The constable, summoned in haste, stood pale and uncertain. "Was it suicide, sir?" Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps. But there is this to consider, that Lady Helena had no reason to end her life, save one that another may have given her. 2. The evidence of the glass. As the household gathered in stunned silence, Poirot began his quiet examination. Every movement was deliberate, every glance purposeful. He pointed to the glass on the carpet. "Observe, Hastings." Only Lady Helena's fingerprints upon it, but the scent of almonds, faint yet unmistakable, clings to the rim. Hastings frowned. "You think someone gave it to her?" "Or left it where she might take it, believing it harmless," Poirot replied. "It was most cleverly done. No violent struggle, no forced entry, yet death as certain as the hangman's rope." He looked toward the broken mirror. "That, too, is curious. It suggests a sudden shock, something or someone she saw in the glass before she died." Hastings followed his gaze. "You think she saw her killer?" Poirot's eyes glimmered. "It is possible. But what did she see that made her knock over the chair, that froze her in terror even as death struck? That, mon ami, is what we must learn." 3. Clara's discovery. Later that afternoon, Poirot called Clara to the library. She entered hesitantly, still shaken. "You wish to speak to me, monsieur?" "Oh, mademoiselle. You were the first to find Lady Helena. Tell me, what did you see, exactly as it occurred?" "I heard her cry out," she began, voice trembling. "I was passing her door on the way to fetch a book. When I went in, she was on the floor. I thought she'd fainted, but then I smelled that awful scent." "And before the scream?" "You heard nothing, no voices, no footsteps." She hesitated. "Perhaps. I thought I heard a door closing." "Down the corridor, near the study." "Near the study, you say?" Poirot murmured. That is most useful. She twisted her hands. Monsieur Poirot, you don't think she did it herself? Poirot's gaze softened. Non, mademoiselle. Lady Helena was not a woman who surrenders to despair. Someone gave her despair as a gift, and she accepted it without knowing. Her eyes filled with tears. This house is cursed. Every night I feel eyes watching me. Poirot took her hand gently. Courage, mademoiselle. The eyes that watch will soon be revealed, and once they are, they shall never look again. 4. The doctor's alibi. That evening, Poirot requested Dr. Marbury's presence. The man entered with a defensive air, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. You wish to interrogate me again, I presume, he said coldly. Not interrogate, doctor, enlighten, Poirot replied. You are, I think, the last person to have spoken with Lady Helena before her death. I was. She called me this morning. She complained of faintness and asked for a tonic. A tonic? Poirot's eyebrows lifted. And you provided one? Yes. I prepared a draft in the library and sent it to her by Merrick. Ah! Poirot exclaimed softly. Then you did not administer it yourself? No, I was summoned to the village at 10. You may confirm that with Constable Green, he saw me leave. Poirot inclined his head. And the ingredients of this tonic, may one ask what they were? Marbury gave a tight smile. Valerian and digitalis, harmless in such small dose. Unless, said Poirot gently, the harmless bottle was exchanged for another. The doctor's composure cracked. Are you accusing me of murder? Poirot spread his hands. I accuse no one, doctor. I only arrange the pieces of a puzzle that others have scattered. Marbury threw his cigarette into the fire and stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Hastings exhaled. Good Lord, Poirot, you think he's guilty? Poirot's moustaches quivered. I think, Hastings, that guilt is a garment many wear too comfortably. But who stitched it, that is the question. 5. The hidden drawer. That night, while the house slept uneasily, Poirot returned to Lady Helena's boudoir. Hastings followed, lantern in hand. Are we allowed in here, Poirot? He whispered. The police sealed the door. Ah, my dear Hastings, the police seal what they see. Poirot opens what they do not. He went straight to the dressing table and began examining the drawers. After a moment, he pressed a carved rose on the side panel, and a hidden compartment slid open with a faint click. Inside lay several folded papers tied with ribbon, and beneath them, a small velvet pouch. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside glittered a ring, an emerald, deep green, engraved with the initials E.R. E.R., Hastings murmured. Edward Ravenshade, the father. Exactment, said Poirot softly. And here, letters, written to Lady Helena by Sir Edward, months before his death. He scanned them quickly. They speak of blackmail, Hastings. Of someone demanding money in exchange for silence. Someone who threatened to expose a family scandal. Hastings stared. Good heavens. You think Julian discovered this, and that's what he meant by our terrible truth? Poirot nodded slowly. It is beginning to take shape, but the hand that holds the pen of blackmail may also have wielded the hand of murder. He replaced the papers and turned to Hastings. 2 deaths, my friend, one swift, one silent, both to protect the same secret. It is the pattern of desperation. 6. Poirot's revelation. The rain began again, soft at first, then in wild bursts against the glass. Poirot stood at the window, watching the reflections of lightning flicker across the lawn. He spoke without turning. Do you recall, Hastings, the strip of green silk I found outside my room? Yes, what of it? It is from a dressing gown. And Lady Helena owned none of that colour. But one person did, a person who claimed to be absent last night, yet left footprints by the library window. Hastings frowned. You mean? Poirot raised a finger. Sure. Not yet. Tomorrow, we shall assemble everyone. I will make the petty's details speak, and the murderer shall have no refuge. He turned from the window, his expression grave and calm. For tonight, let us lock our doors, mon ami. The murderer of Ravenshade Hall is not finished yet. Chapter 6, The Shadow of Truth. The morning after Lady Helena's death broke in pale silver light, glinting weakly through the mist that blanketed Ravenshade's grounds. The air inside the house was heavy, scented faintly of damp linen and sorrow. No one spoke above a whisper, even footsteps seemed subdued, as if the very floors feared to wake another ghost. Poirot took his breakfast alone in the library, reading through the letters he had found hidden in Lady Helena's secret drawer. Hastings, restless as ever, hovered near the fireplace, watching the detective's eyes flick swiftly from line to line. You've been at those papers for an hour, Poirot, Hastings said at last. Are they so important? Poirot placed the letters down carefully. They are vital, my friend. Each word is a tile in the mosaic, seemingly small, yet together they reveal the pattern of deceit. Hastings leaned forward. What do they say? They speak of money, always money, Poirot replied softly. So Edward Ravenshade was blackmailed for years. The letters demand sums under threat of exposure, though they never reveal what secret the blackmailer possessed. It is the tone that interests me, the language of someone educated, methodical, and cruel. He tapped the page with a manicured finger. And the last letter, dated 3 days before Sir Edward's death, warns that unless he paid one final demand, the truth would be revealed to Julian. Hastings frowned. So Julian might have learned it, and threatened to expose the culprit. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Ah, mon cher Hastings, at last you begin to see. Julian discovered the blackmail, confronted the villain, and paid with his life. Then, when Lady Helena found the letters and understood too much, she was silenced also. He rose briskly. Come, we must speak to Merrick. The butler knows more than he has said. 1. The butler's story. Merrick was found in the servants' hall, polishing silver that no longer needed polishing. His eyes darted nervously when Poirot entered. Merrick, Poirot began gently, you have served this family many years. You were with Sir Edward until the end, and later with his son. Surely you observed much. The butler swallowed hard. I did, sir, but a man in my position keeps his eyes open and his mouth shut. Just so, said Poirot. But now, 2 of your masters are dead. Silence helps only the guilty. Tell me, did you ever see Sir Edward receive letters marked with a black seal? Merrick's expression changed. Yes, sir. He burned them all, every one, in that very fireplace. Once I saw him trembling as he read one, white as paper he was. Do you know who delivered them? The butler hesitated, then nodded slowly. A messenger, sir. But once, just once, I saw Dr. Marbury leave a note for Sir Edward myself. He said it was about medicine, but I had my doubts. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Merci, Merrick. That will do. When they had left the servants' hall, Hastings whispered, You think Marbury was the blackmailer? Poirot's voice was low. It is possible, but I have learned never to seize upon the obvious. The truth often hides behind its own reflection. 2. The footprints in the mist. Later that day, Poirot and Hastings walked the grounds. The fog still clung low over the lawns, muffling every sound. Poirot moved with his usual delicacy, his eye scanning the gravel path that led to the library windows. Suddenly he stopped. Regardez, Hastings, there. in the soft mud. Hastings bent over. Footprints. 2 sets, one smaller, lighter, the other broad and deep. Exactment, said Poirot. The larger ones belonged to a man who carried weight and perhaps a bag. The smaller, to a woman. He traced the pattern with his stick. They meet here, near the window, and look, the prints overlap. They faced each other. Hastings frowned. Could it have been Lady Helena and Marbury? Poirot shook his head. No. These prints are recent. See, the edges are crisp. They were made last night. Hastings looked startled. Then someone was here while we slept. Poirot's voice dropped. Not just someone. The murderer returned, perhaps to recover what he lost. 3. The burned paper. That evening, Poirot requested that the constable light a fire in the study. As the flames caught, a faint glint among the ashes caught his eye. He knelt, tweezers in hand, and withdrew a charred fragment of paper. Careful, Hastings, hold the lantern higher. The fragment was blackened, but a few words remained legible, cannot remain silent forever. The truth, the rest was lost to ash. Hastings exhaled. It's one of the blackmail letters. OUI, Poirot murmured, turning it over. And note the handwriting, smooth, professional. I have seen it before, Hastings, though I cannot yet say where. He looked toward the desk. And see here, the ink bottle has been refilled recently, yet no new letters written. Someone used this desk after Lady Helena's death. You mean the murderer forged something? Perhaps, Poirot said softly. Or perhaps he wrote his own destruction. 4. Clara's fear. As the night deepened, Poirot sent for Clara. She entered the study hesitantly, her eyes red from weeping. Mademoiselle, he said kindly, you have suffered much. Yet there is something you have not told me. She looked startled. What makes you think so? Poirot smiled faintly. Because you are honest. The truly innocent are often tormented by what they withhold, even when they think it unimportant. Come, speak freely. She took a breath. It was the night before Lady Helena died. I saw Dr. Marbury again, outside her room. He was holding a small bottle. When he saw me, he smiled and said he had come to check on her sleeping draught. But he looked different. Nervous. Poirot inclined his head. And you did not tell me. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid of what it might mean. Courage, mademoiselle, Poirot said softly. Fear is natural, but fear is also the veil that murderers depend upon. He rose. You have done well. Now go, and sleep if you can. Tomorrow, I promise, the darkness will begin to lift. 5. Poirot's reflection. When Clara had gone, Hastings said, that settles it, doesn't it? Marbury must be the man. He had access to poisons, a motive in the blackmail, and every chance to act. Poirot's eyes glimmered in the lamplight. So it would appear. And yet, there is one little thing that disturbs the order of my thoughts. What's that? Poirot picked up the charred paper again. This handwriting, it is not Marbury's. And there was something else, the faint scent of perfume upon the silk I found outside my room. Perfume? But? Yes, mon ami, Poirot said gently. A woman's perfume. Not Clara's, and not Lady Helena's either. It was heavier, more sophisticated. He smiled slowly. The scent of a woman who hides strength beneath charm. A woman who knows too much, and perhaps has killed to keep it so. Hastings frowned. But who? Sure, Poirot raised a finger. Not yet. Tomorrow, we shall gather everyone in the drawing room. Then, my dear Hastings, the little grey cells shall speak. 6. Night visitors. That night, the rain fell again, steady, relentless. Poirot sat in the library, lights dimmed, pretending to read. On the desk lay the letters, the torn silk, and the charred paper. The clock struck midnight. Then, a sound. Soft footsteps outside the door. Poirot did not move. The handle turned slowly. A shadow entered, small, graceful, deliberate. The figure approached the desk, gloved hands reaching for the letters. Poirot flicked on the lamp. "Bonsoir, madam," he said gently. Clara Brent froze in the light, eyes wide, guilt written upon her face. "Monsieur Poirot," she stammered. Poirot's voice was calm. "You came for the letters, did you not? It is quite all right. Sit down, if you please. I can explain." "Ah, but I do not wish for explanations tonight," Poirot said softly. "Tomorrow morning, all will be explained, by me." He gestured to the constable waiting outside, who stepped forward quietly. "You will remain in your room until I send for you. You are in no danger, unless, of course, you attempt to flee." As the girl was led away, Hastings whispered, "You think she's the killer after all?" Poirot looked at the papers, his face unreadable. "I think, Hastings, that every innocent person hides one guilty secret, and every murderer hides one innocent act. Tomorrow, we shall learn which she is." He turned off the lamp and murmured to the shadows. "The time for truth has come." The curtain rises for the final act. Chapter 7. The trap is set. The following morning dawned crisp and bright, as though the storm of sorrow had finally exhausted itself. Yet within Ravenshade Hall, the atmosphere remained taut with unease. Every clock ticked like a heartbeat. Every whisper seemed a warning. Poirot had summoned all remaining inhabitants, Dr. Marbury, Clara Brent, Merrick the butler, and the constable, to the drawing room at 11 o'clock. Even Hastings, usually buoyant, looked grim. The great detective's calmness was unnerving. He moved with measured grace, his expression serene, yet his green-grey eyes were alight with purpose. "Monsieur Poirot," said Hastings at last, "you mean to unmask the murderer today?" Poirot's moustaches twitched with satisfaction. "Mais oui, mon ami. Today, the shadows will scatter. The little grey cells have laboured well, now they shall speak, and the guilty shall be revealed." He adjusted the crease of his cuff. "But patience, Hastings. A trap, to be perfect, must be baited with just the right morsel." 1. The gathering. At the stroke of 11, the household entered. Merrick moved stiffly, pale as linen. Dr. Marbury appeared defiant, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. Clara Brent, escorted by the constable, looked fragile but composed, her hands clasped tightly before her. Poirot gestured toward the hearth. "Miss Amos," he began, "we are here to restore order to this house of tragedy. 2 deaths, both cruel, both deliberate. The murderer moves among us still, confident, perhaps, that their secret remains safe." He paused, letting silence stretch, then continued softly, "But nothing is hidden from the eyes of Hercule Poirot." Dr. Marbury scoffed. "Is this performance necessary? We have all suffered enough." Poirot inclined his head politely. "Indeed, Doctor. Yet truth must have its theatre, and I am merely its humble stage manager." He began pacing slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Let us review, yes? Julian Ravenshade was found dead in the library, strangled. Lady Helena followed, poisoned. Both deaths served one purpose, to silence knowledge of an old crime." A murmur rippled through the room. 2. The old sin. Poirot stopped before the window, gazing out at the grey lawns. Many years ago, Sir Edward Ravenshade was guilty of a terrible injustice. He ruined a man, a friend, over a business scandal that was, in truth, of his own making. The man took his life. Sir Edward, haunted by guilt, concealed the truth. He turned sharply. But someone learned it, someone close. That person blackmailed him for years. The letters we found prove this. Dr. Marbury shifted uncomfortably. And you accuse me, no doubt. Poirot smiled. Patience, Doctor. We will come to you soon enough. He lifted one of the half-burned letters. The blackmailer used stationery from the Ravenshade household. They wrote with grace, precision, a cultured hand. It was not the work of a clumsy mind. He looked toward Clara. And yet, Mademoiselle, when I examined your handwriting in Lady Helena's correspondence, I found it to be identical. Clara gasped, her face blanching. That's impossible. I never. Poirot raised a hand. Calm yourself, Mademoiselle. I do not yet accuse. But facts must be faced. You were Sir Edward's secretary. You typed his will, his letters. You had access to his personal papers. Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, but I never blackmailed him. I only knew that someone was. And yet, Poirot said gently, the strip of green silk found outside my door, it was from your dressing gown. Her breath caught. I dropped it days ago. I swear. Poirot studied her closely, then nodded slowly. Perhaps you did. Perhaps someone wished us to think otherwise. 3. The poisoner's hand. Poirot turned to Dr. Marbury. Now, Doctor. You were executor to Sir Edward's will. You prepared tonics for Lady Helena. You quarrelled with Julian the night before his death. Marbury straightened. I had no reason to kill either of them. Yes, Julian accused me, he said I'd falsified medical certificates for Sir Edward's health insurance. Lies. The man was half mad. Perhaps, said Poirot softly. But it was convenient, was it not, that Julian died before he could make his accusations public? Marbury's jaw tightened. You can prove nothing. Poirot smiled faintly. On the contrary. The bottle of tonic you gave Lady Helena, the one that killed her, contained a mixture of hydrocyanic acid. The residue remains even now upon the stopper. Yet the label bears no trace of your fingerprints. Only those of another. He turned. Merrick! The butler looked up, terrified. So, you handled that bottle before Lady Helena's death. I only cleaned it, sir, after Dr. Marbury left it on the table. Poirot interrupted gently. So you say. Yet the bottle's label was fresh, newly written in a woman's hand. He looked toward Clara again. Do you see how the circle narrows? Clara shook her head violently. No. You're wrong. 4. The perfect deception. Poirot took a step forward, his voice quiet but commanding. Non, mademoiselle, I am not wrong. For you, and you alone, had motive and opportunity. Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. I loved Julian. Why would I kill him? Because, said Poirot softly, you loved him, but he discovered your secret. He found the blackmail letters, recognized your typewriter, confronted you, and threatened to expose you to his mother. You panicked. You silenced him. No. Poirot's gaze did not waver. Then, when Lady Helena found those same letters hidden in her husband's drawer, you feared she, too, would learn the truth. You replaced her medicine with poison, and left the silk at my door, to make it appear that Dr. Marbury was the guilty one. Clara sank into a chair, trembling. It's not true. I didn't. Poirot's tone softened, almost pitying. Mademoiselle, you are clever, but you forgot the smallest of things, the handwriting upon the labels of the tonic bottles. You wrote Valerian tonic in your usual neat secretary's script. The same hand that penned the blackmail notes. He held up 2 pieces of paper. Compare them, even the loops, the pressure, the angle of the letters. Exactement parial. Clara's tears spilled freely. I never meant to kill him. It was only supposed to frighten him, to make him keep silent. Marbury's face twisted with shock. Good God, woman! You killed them both. Poirot raised a hand. Not quite, Doctor. For Julian's death was not deliberate murder, it was rage, not planning. But Lady Helena's, that was cold, calculated. You knew she was ill, you knew no one would question the tonic. Clara's voice broke into a sob. She said she'd send for the police, she said I'd hang. I only wanted to protect myself. Poirot bowed his head slightly. And so you damned yourself, mademoiselle. The path of deceit leads only to one destination. 5. The confession. The silence that followed was dreadful. Only the fire's faint crackle filled the room. Clara wept into her hands. Poirot spoke softly to the constable. You have heard her words. You will do your duty. The constable nodded solemnly and stepped forward. Clara rose unsteadily, her voice trembling. Monsieur Poirot, if I hadn't fallen in love with him, none of this would have happened. Poirot's eyes were grave. L'amour, mademoiselle, is not an excuse for crime. True love is never born of fear or greed. She was led away. The door closed gently behind her. 6. Poirot reflects. For a long moment, no one spoke. Poirot moved to the window, gazing out at the bleak autumn gardens where mist drifted low across the lawns. Hastings cleared his throat quietly. You were magnificent, Poirot. But tell me, when did you first suspect her? Poirot smiled faintly. From the beginning, mon ami. There is a certain kind of guilt that only the innocent-hearted can attempt to hide. Mademoiselle Clara's eyes betrayed more fear than sorrow. And when she spoke of Julian, it was with love, but also possession. Love and jealousy, Hastings, are twins who share the same cradle. He sighed. And the silk, the perfume, the handwriting, they merely confirmed what my little grey cells had already whispered. Hastings nodded. It's a sad business. Oh, Poirot murmured. Truly sad. For she was not evil, only weak, and desperate. But weakness, my friend, can kill as surely as malice. He turned from the window, his eyes reflecting both triumph and sorrow. Come, Hastings. There remains but one thing, the telling of the full tale. Tomorrow, I shall explain everything, for there is still one secret left unspoken. Chapter 8, The Final Revelation. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in the ancient stones of Ravenshade Hall. The following morning, the house stood silent, a great, brooding monument to tragedy. The servants moved quietly, as though fearful to disturb the heavy air. Yet, within the library, the very room where Julian Ravenshade had met his death, Hercule Poirot sat as calmly as if preparing for afternoon tea. He was immaculate, as ever, his suit pressed to perfection, his shoes gleaming like black mirrors. Before him, the fire crackled softly. Across the table sat Hastings, pale and thoughtful, his brow furrowed. It feels strange, Hastings said at last. The case is over, and yet I can't shake the feeling that something remains untold. Poirot's moustaches quivered approvingly. Très bien, Hastings. You are learning. Indeed, one piece of the puzzle has not yet been placed. Mademoiselle Clara was guilty of murder, yes, but she was not the first cause of all this evil. Hastings frowned. Not the first? But she killed both Julian and Lady Helena. Poirot raised a delicate finger. She believed she did. Yet sometimes, mon ami, the truth wears a clever disguise. Allow me to lift the mask. He rose gracefully, turned toward the window, and spoke almost to himself. Ravenshade Hall, a house built upon deceit. For years, lies have rotted its heart. We have spoken of Sir Edward's guilt, of blackmail and betrayal, but we have not yet uncovered the deepest lie. 1. The ghost of the past. Hastings leaned forward. You mean Sir Edward's scandal, the ruined man? Poirot nodded. Just so. The man's name was Arthur Keston. He was Sir Edward's business partner, and the true victim of the Ravenshade fortune. Sir Edward framed him for embezzlement, to save himself. Keston took his own life. His wife fled the country with their infant daughter. Hastings nodded. Yes, I remember reading that in the letters. Poirot turned sharply. And did it not strike you as odd, mon ami, that Lady Helena, the refined, gracious wife of Sir Edward, should have been a widow from abroad before their marriage? Hastings blinked. Good Lord, you mean? Oh, said Poirot softly. Lady Helena was Mrs. Keston. Hastings stared. But that means she married the man who destroyed her husband. Exactment, Poirot said quietly. Outwardly, she forgave him. Inwardly, she never did. She planned her revenge, slowly, carefully. She married him to gain control of his wealth, to keep him forever under her eye. When he died, she inherited everything. And when the guilt of her husband's crime was discovered in those hidden letters, she chose to protect her son's inheritance by silence. Poirot paused. But guilt breeds guilt. When Julian discovered the truth, he threatened to expose it. Lady Helena, terrified of scandal, implored Clara to destroy the letters. Clara, foolishly hoping to protect Julian, hid them instead, and used them to blackmail Sir Edward before his death, thinking to secure money for herself and the man she loved. Hastings exhaled slowly. So it was all built on revenge, and fear. OUI. And thus, the sins of one generation destroyed the next. 2. A final visitor. A gentle knock came at the door. It was Merrick, the butler, his face drawn. A visitor for you, sir. From Scotland Yard. Inspector Japp entered, his brisk manner tempered by solemnity. Morning, Poirot. Heard you've wrapped it all up, neat as a parcel. The girl confessed, did she? She did, mon cher Japp, Poirot said smoothly. But there is more to tell. You see, the poison that killed Lady Helena, it was not the same that Clara claimed to have used. Japp's eyes narrowed. Not the same? Poirot nodded. No. Clara prepared a mild sleeping draught. Her intent was only to make Lady Helena ill, to delay her from calling the police. But when the tonic was analyzed, it revealed hydrocyanic acid, a deadly poison introduced after Clara last handled it. Japp frowned. Then someone else. Exactly. Someone who knew of Clara's crime, and used it to conceal their own. Hastings stared. But who? Poirot's gaze fell on Merrick, who stood frozen in the doorway. Shall I tell you, monsieur, or will you save us the trouble? The butler's face drained of colour. I don't know what you mean, sir. Poirot's voice was soft, deadly precise. Ah, but you do. You were Sir Edward's man for 30 years. You knew his secrets. You handled his letters, destroyed his papers. You even found the blackmail notes in the fire, half-burnt, and kept them. Merrick's hands trembled. I was loyal to him. None. You were loyal only to your revenge. For you, too, had a reason to hate him. You were Arthur Keston's brother-in-law. A strangled gasp escaped Merrick's lips. Yes, Poirot continued calmly. You changed your name when you entered Sir Edward's service. And when your sister died abroad, abandoned, penniless, you swore vengeance. You waited years. When Clara's foolish scheme gave you the perfect chance, you struck. Merrick's knees weakened. I didn't mean to kill her. I only wanted her to suffer, to see what she'd done to my family. Poirot's tone was grave. So you poisoned Lady Helena's tonic, knowing Clara would be blamed. 2 birds with 1 stone. But alas, the little details, they betrayed you. The label was written by Clara, yes, but the bottle was sealed with wax, not glue. A servant's trick, learned long ago in the kitchens. The mark of your handiwork. Merrick sank to his knees. It's true. God forgive me. Japp stepped forward grimly. You can tell that to the magistrate. 3. The last puzzle piece. When Merrick had been taken away, silence once more filled the great library. The morning sun streamed faintly through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Hastings exhaled slowly. So, in the end, it was Merrick who killed Lady Helena, not Clara. "Oh, said Poirot, and yet Clara is not innocent. Her blackmail and her lie began the chain. Each crime was born of another, pride, fear, vengeance. Ravenshade Hall has long been cursed, Hastings, not by ghosts, but by human frailty." He moved to the mantelpiece, brushing a speck of dust from its edge. It is always thus. The great tragedies, they do not come from evil alone, but from weakness, the failure to confess, to forgive, to love without possession. Hastings nodded, subdued. You've seen too many such houses, haven't you, Poirot? Poirot smiled faintly. Perhaps. But still, I believe, every house, even the darkest, may one day see light again. He turned to the window, where mist was lifting from the grounds. Ravenshade will stand. The new heirs, distant cousins, will arrive. Life will begin anew. 4. The epilogue. That afternoon, as Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave, the constable approached with Clara's farewell note. She had been taken away to await trial, but her words were simple, sorrowful. Tell Monsieur Poirot I am grateful. I could not bear the lies any longer. Perhaps truth, at last, will give me peace. Poirot folded the note gently. Ah, la pauvre. She has paid the price of silence. Yet confession, even at the end, redeems a little. As they stepped outside, the autumn sun broke through the clouds. The air smelled of damp earth and fading roses. The great detective paused to glance once more at the house, its windows glittering like tired eyes, watching the world move on. Hastings turned to him. Another case closed, eh, Poirot? Though I dare say it was one of your darker ones. Poirot's moustaches lifted slightly. Perhaps, mon ami. But such is life, the light and the shadow, forever entwined. He adjusted his hat with precision. Come, Hastings. The train to London awaits, and I have promised myself an evening of order and comfort. I shall polish my shoes, straighten my ties, and restore symmetry to the universe. Hastings laughed softly. Only you could make justice sound like tidying a desk. Poirot smiled, his eyes gleaming. But of course. For to bring order where there was chaos, that, my friend, is the work of Hercule Poirot. Together they walked down the gravel drive, the golden leaves swirling at their feet. Behind them, Ravenshade Hall stood silent, its secrets finally laid to rest.